Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, and I welcome you to a new part of People's View. This is the part that we discuss about proposed legislation and other political affairs that are going on, both domestically and federally. I've served 4 terms rather, on the Public Works Committee. And our other one is Kevin
Kevin
Scully?
Scully, yeah, a one-termer from
One-termer.
from Ward 6. I was on Children and Family Law.
Okay, and Don?
And I'm Don LeBrun. I served 4 terms on Health and Human Services. Decided not to run again, and now I serve on the Board of Medicine.
Very good. You were a vice chair, too, on
Vice
and
chair
Human
and chair
Services.
for the last 2 years.
Yeah. So we have this background, and we like to have your feedback on our discussion and whether you'd like to see us talk about some other things maybe in greater detail in the future. But we're going to have to try one of these meetings with you every week for the next several weeks. So today we got number of things. I mean, if you looked at the TV, you saw nothing but the political show there, trying to see whether they were going to get a subpoena on the Attorney General to discuss things that he, by law, is not able to discuss.
Yeah. Political posturing.
And that's all it is. It looked like there's 2 different worlds when I was listening to them, depending on which ones, and they sort of alternated, so you got both sides.
Yeah, they sort of want to force him to submit things that he by law cannot submit,
right,
so that they can then sue him,
yeah,
or charge him with breaking the law.
Yeah,
it's as ridiculous as it gets.
Yeah. One of the things I'm thinking is they're trying to get him either get him to resign or to get him impeached or whatever, so that he doesn't do what he wants to do. And he admitted that he saw that in his first interview, that he was going to look into the things that caused the FBI to look into Trump's committees when he was running, and whether or not some of these people, like the Clinton, who financed the Clinton Foundation, who financed that
Steele dossier.
The dossier.
Yeah.
That really initiated getting a special investigator, a special prosecutor.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, this really, I'm not sure the general public at this point really understands just how serious what happened is. When you go back to Nixon and the old Watergate days, there was a bunch of his lower-level people broke into, as a Democrat, office to try to get information. He didn't know about it. But he did try to cover it up, so he got in trouble for the cover-up. The cover-up was worse than the actual crime. This is what I think can only be described as a coup attempt against a duly elected president of the United States by what's known, called by some parties as the deep state, which is those people who are entrenched into the government itself. And I think Hillary Clinton, and I have to tell you, I think this is going to reach all the way up to Barack Obama, knew about this and were working with the CIA and the FBI and the Department of Justice to try to create a crime which they could use to then impeach the president and get him out of office. This is, to me, is the textbook definition of sedition. And that's what's happening. So we now finally have an Attorney General, Barr, who is saying at this point the right things, which is, I'm going to see where this trail leads us. And I think this trail is going to lead right back to the office of Barack Obama. And I think there's a lot of very powerful people in Washington who are starting to get very, very worried. You know, the old saying is, if you strike at the king, don't miss.
Yeah.
They missed. And now, if the right things happen here and justice is actually pursued, I think some very powerful people are going to be in big trouble, and they have to get Barr out of there, because he's just the guy, I think, who could follow this trail and do that.
Clean up the mess, because I think it goes back quite a number of years. It's not just after Trump, it's after the Republicans and what they could do for themselves.
This goes all the way back into the Clinton administration.
Yeah. I think that Clinton Foundation is an evil organization in a way.
But the disgrace of the thing is, here's the highest law enforcement agency
Right.
in the country, and all this corruption in there. I mean, that's just a total disgrace to the country.
The number of people that got involved, and I assume some of the innocent ones are going to get involved too.
Stark and
because,
Page and all the
yeah,
rest of them.
I mean, you have some written information on what they did, and you ought to be able to get the answer what they mean about who was in their group, I guess you might say, because they had to have some very influential people backing them, or they wouldn't have been doing it themselves.
If you and I committed a petty crime and we destroyed our computers and everything else and beat the hell out of them with a hammer and all that, we'd still go to jail.
All right. Right.
But some people can do things like that and get a pass. It makes no sense.
It doesn't. I don't know whether we'll be able to get some people to testify, and we might see some accidents happening. That,
Arkansas. I mean,
It's
there's been a lot of that in the past.
It's happened before. Vince Foster.
Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of
Or,
things.
or
like
Seth Richards, right?
Seven of them altogether.
Who was murdered. It's a little scary because I guess when powerful people get in trouble, some terrible things can happen to little folks.
Powerful
Right.
people know evil people.
Yeah.
And all the side things that are happening too. I don't know. You see where Soros's money's been going into different things, and he's getting some of the federal money from the United States to back his involvement with countries in Europe.
Yep.
You know, to try to overturn their governments when we're trying to help them, and he's in getting them to change their motives or whatever.
Well, look
their
at John
operation.
Kerry and his involvement in the Iranian situation.
Right. Yeah.
Because his daughter married an Iranian or something like that?
Oh, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
she did. Somebody who was pretty powerful in the current government administration.
Yeah.
So
I
it's-
wonder how many of our people out there that are listening right now know about all these things. Or are they just thinking that we're just making them up?
Well, if you watch Water's World, a lot of people don't know anything.
Well, that's true.
Well, this is one of the real big problems
That
from my
is.
perspective. Most people are out there trying to live their lives, make a dollar, pay the bills, take care of their family, and they rely on certain places to give them the information that they need to be able to make informed decisions and hopefully be good citizens. There's different ways you can lie.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the biggest ways and best ways you can lie is by omission.
That's right.
So if the
agree.
large, what they call the mainstream media is basically not talking about some of these incredibly important and serious things and scary things, quite honestly, where's the average person going to get this information? Now, we're, I guess, in more of the fringe in terms of people who actually pay a lot of attention to this area in terms of politics. The average person doesn't do that.
No, they don't.
And if the press and the media is not telling the whole story, they're never going to be able to make informed decisions as to who do they want to be running their government. And so that's part of the problem too, is how do you overcome that wall of silence that's there where I think a lot of conservative people, such as ourselves, are saying, wait, you have to understand what's going on here. This is scary. We need to do something. And most people don't know or understand. So I'm not sure what we're going to do here yet, except I think that it's really important for folks to try to find good, reliable sources of information they can trust and start paying a little bit more attention as to what's happening here.
Well, that's the problem. You really don't have sources you can trust because so many times you hear things on the news, they report a situation, and the next thing you know, it's completely false.
Yeah.
So who can you believe? You take it with a grain of salt. You wait for the next guy to come along and tell you whether it's true or not.
Well, you think this story that the Times came out with on surveillance and the person that tried to go after one of Trump's people try to get him to try to get some information out of him about meetings that they had with the Russians. It was a woman who...
the one that took place in England, I believe took place,
But
Is that Papadopoulos? Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, Papadopoulos.
Yeah.
Nice Irish boy.
Oh, yeah. But, if that story is true, you didn't expect that from the Times, but they let that go, because that is a very important factor. That's a little bit more than surveillance.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're debating what surveillance means, whether it's spying or not. Well, it's a big word. It covers a lot of different ways of doing it. But the fact that they went after him in that manner would bother me. You can surveillance, in my mind, if you're going to do it with a presidential candidate, means watching him very carefully, but not trying to trip him up.
Right, not entrapment.
Not entrapment,
Yeah.
not try to get him into omitting something or saying something that could be interpreted many different ways.
Well, Hillary called us deplorables, so I guess they must be despicables or something. I don't know.
Well, don't get me on her, because
It's all in a name,
I just don't see how that was. I don't care who ran, but I would vote for whoever ran against her from what her history is.
Yeah.
I mean, she just is not a person I would trust.
And she still won't go away.
No,
She's still trying to figure out what happened.
Well, not only that, I think she's waiting in the, on the side there, seeing it, watch all the 22 other people kill themselves, as far as politically, and then she
They're
comes
not
out,
going to
"I'm
consider her. I
here."
can guarantee you that. They're not going to consider her.
No, I don't think so. I hope not, anyway. But let's somehow get our people back. I mean, we're having the same problem here in the state. We got two very contentious groups. They're not agreeing on anything, and we have an economy that's going nice. We have some excess funds that come in every year, and now we're trying to change that. Well, that's not what I would think as a past legislator I would want to do. I mean, if it's running well and giving us more than we had thought, let's keep on going in the same path. Why change and have all these different regulations coming in, fees and stuff? And the main thing that I think affected the income was the cutting of the business taxes. And they're not only not continuing them, they're going back to the old rate.
Right.
Which is, to me, like shooting yourself in the head and saying, see, I did it.
And the scholarship fund that they repealed.
Oh, yeah, that's...
I mean, that was a beautiful program. How many times have I sat here and said that everybody has good ideas if you only put your heads together?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what they won't do. This is the worst legislature that I can remember in this state.
Well, let me ask you this. If you wanted to destroy the business environment in New Hampshire, what things would you do to do that? You would raise business taxes, you would raise the cost of labor, and you would raise the cost of energy. So if you did those three things, you would effectively destroy the business climate in New Hampshire. The Democrat legislature has tried to do, and passed in the House, all three of those things. So I'm looking at this saying, oh my God, what are you doing? This is crazy. And we've gotten to the point where we're relying on one man. We've got one man, the governor, Chris Sununu, between us and destroying the economic environment and social environment of New Hampshire, perhaps forever.
Whether it's a blue or red pen.
Yes. Yeah. So I think he is going to stand strong on these important issues. But I really do think that the people of New Hampshire hopefully have seen enough now to say, okay, if the Democrats stay in charge, this will happen. They'll keep coming back to this and trying it again and again and again till they get the right person in the governor's office, and then nobody will be able to stop them.
Right.
So what do you want, New Hampshire? What do you want this place to be? Yeah.
Well, I hope you're right on that, but there's too many things that are going through, and you know how it all goes in the last month of June is going to be very interesting, how they do a little horse trading and stuff. And I know the governor has a couple of pet peeves that he'd like to have. Leave the parental leave.
Family medical leave.
Yeah, is one of his big ones. And does he trade that for something else? How is he gonna? What is he gonna give? Or is he gonna veto 25 different bills that went through? At least 25 that are negative, I think.
Well, I have to tell you, I think if I was the governor at this point, seeing what the Democrats are trying to attempt, I would veto everything and let us go right back to the default budget and keep everything exactly where it is. where we're paying for everything and we have a surplus that continues to come in, and then perhaps they can negotiate on how to spend that money on one-time things
Yeah.
that would benefit New Hampshire, rather than trying to incorporate increased spending, structurally into the government, where we'll never be able to keep up with it based on our current revenue streams.
We did that in our last session when we kept San from signing the budget until she had to give up and sign
Right.
something
Yeah.
in September.
We
or
were about to
something.
go back to a default budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
And
think
she
that
saw the
worked.
light. But that was a case where finally people sat down and discussed an issue and came up with a solution.
Well, it was a force, and it wasn't as big though as now. Now
No.
there's a lot more
But I'm
on
not
the
sure
table.
they're capable of doing that with this legislature. They seem hell-bent on just dividing everything. I'm not sure they can come together.
That would be interesting to see how that works out. So it's going to have a good summer because
know in another
the
month.
fall's going to be. Well, we don't know how long that'll last too.
Yeah.
Well, what other things that you saw in the legislation that's up there? I mean, they're cleaning it up now. They've done most of the big issues already.
Yeah.
Voting for marijuana is one big one that I worry about.
Oh, how that has morphed into what it has from what it started at. It started at something that would be regulated by the medical field for certain conditions, terminal illnesses, and every single year they came up with a new illness. It's gotten to the point now where if you have a hangnail that hurts bad enough, you can get marijuana.
And they scare you too because they're afraid you're going to get something like go to fentanyl or something like that. And kill
Well, it
yourself.
is a gateway drug.
Yeah.
It's definitely, everybody knows that. Even though they deny it, everybody knows it's a gateway drug.
It's just like, everybody brings up the example, well, it's like liquor. Yeah, you have people addicted to liquor. Yeah, but that's already in place. Right now is your chance to limit it. Just
We can
keep
go back
it
to
in
prohibition as far as I'm concerned. That wouldn't hurt me a bit.
Well,
Take away the cigarettes, take away the alcohol, take away all of it.
well, it's like all the evil things that happen. You got to think of what you're blaming. It's the people that are involved, not what I might call the tool, the marijuana, the alcohol, the guns, or whatever, which people are trying to do. And these are inanimate things. You can't
But too
blame
often
them.
we decide to jump right into the fire without looking at what the consequences might be.
Right.
Well, I guess I'm a little bit more libertarian in this issue than you two gentlemen are. I personally think that we've tried the war on drugs and the prohibition. It's failed.
Yeah.
And we're taking the same tact that we did. The folks on the left are trying to control guns, the thing,
Right.
not the behavior of the people.
Right.
And so I think for me there's too much of an emphasis on the thing, and there's not enough emphasis on personal responsibility. So if you put this apparatus in place and you criminalize it, and then suddenly you have to take all the resources of law enforcement to go after this particular type of behavior, which is currently a crime, I think you're diverting a lot of resources away from the more serious types of crimes. My personal opinion is, at the end of the day, you become an adult, you have to learn self-control. There are people who don't have it and never will have it, and they'll end up destroying themselves. But the flip side is, once you start saying, I need to control you and your behavior, that takes you down a very scary road. So personally, I think we've gone too far in that direction. I'm okay with coming back on this one. I mean, I may be proven wrong here, but at the end of the day, I'm going to rely on the good sense of the average person to be able to control themselves in their own lives, rather than us trying to tell them how to live it.
But we have a serious opioid crisis, and we're going to legalize a gateway drug that leads to that crisis?
We're back to the same thing again, is who is forcing them to take opioids? Unless you're tying somebody down and sticking the needle in their arm, that's a personal decision. How do you stop somebody who's hell-bent on destroying themselves?
If you look at the opioid crisis, it really doesn't begin that way. That's what it ends up as. But the way it begins is the fact that the drug companies subsidize the medical schools. They dictate the curricula. The doctors come out of medical schools knowing that no matter what patient they see, there's a drug that they should prescribe for that individual.
Right.
That leads to more drug use. Next thing you know, the cost of drugs is so high that people can find it cheaper on the street. They end up getting dirty drugs, and it ends up in overdoses and deaths and whatnot. It all starts with the drug companies. The drug companies even write the PDR that the doctor uses to determine what prescription, what drug to give to a patient.
That's a very good point.
I think I agree with both of you. You both have a good point, and the point I have on it has to do with control or being able to detect problems. Detect the use of marijuana if a person was involved in a traffic accident, a blood test or something like that, equivalent to that. And the other part is the part that they're doing now in monitoring the prescriptions and watching what they're doing. Like they're suing the company that fed millions of the pills in West Virginia, a small state. But way out, the number was way out of line.
West Virginia has the biggest, or the largest drug problem in the country.
Well, whatever it was, but you're right. The companies were using all kinds of sales techniques and pushing the amount of drugs that were shipped there. Then they have to look into that. That's what I think needs to be done. There should be, while you can't control all the people, you can control some of the ways of measuring out of control activities.
Well, it is your point, which I thought was interesting, is that I think most of the opioid addictions start using with legal drugs, and then there's an irony here, which is that we've been cutting down on the number of prescriptions that are being written, which forces the person, I think you had mentioned this, out onto the street, and they go try to get a substitute drug, and they have no idea what the concentration and strength is.
Right.
So they went from something, a controlled situation, which was bad for them, to an uncontrolled situation. They buy something, it's 10 times stronger than what they were used to, and they end up overdosing and killing themselves. So it's again, an irony. So we tried to fix something by saying you can't have less, and people went and found it, and now more people are dying because of that.
And it also goes back to what you were saying about personal responsibility. People have to take responsibility for what they do, what they put in their system. Another factor is the human body was never designed to ingest chemicals of any kind. It just doesn't handle chemicals well.
Well, food's chemicals too, so.
Food is full of chemicals, yes.
Sleep pizza out of
We can't get away from it, but nevertheless, the body is not made to ingest chemicals. Another thing that happened today, Trump with the drug company advertisements.
Right.
It's just like when they first said to put the warning on cigarettes and alcohol and whatnot. Now the drug companies are going to have to indicate what the price of their drug is.
Right.
So that sets up competition. Because each drug company now is going to have to watch the other company and try to compare their drug, which may be a different name, but it's the exact same drug. And they have to come in at a lower price.
Well, I just talk from a personal problem that I'm having now. When you can have the same company changing prices monthly, going to one of the drugstores, that you have, your CVS, your Walgreens, your Walmart, and whatever, and finding out that if I wanted to get a 3-month supply, it's not 3 times what my 30-day supply is. It's 10 times.
Yeah. Oh my God, really?
And
more.
That's happened. I'm trying to figure out.
I can tell you.
I'm trying to figure out. That's the first time I got into something like that.
Yeah.
Because usually, what I have as a diabetic, though, it's something that I know I have to take, but how the hell do I control the pricing?
Yeah. That's really
now you'll know ahead of time, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to a couple of men who were diabetics, and they were talking about the fact that I guess the insulin is not treated as a drug, it's a biologic.
Yeah.
And because of that, they were able to extend the copyright period. I'm not sure what the right term of that is.
Yeah. Okay.
But it allows them, they keep changing the formula and extending the period of time over which they can control the insulin. and they were able to set the price. There is no free market.
Right.
So they said some of the insulin prices had, over the last 20 years, had gone up 10 times. Usually, the prices come down when you start making it and you've worked out how to do it and you can increase production capacity. It's exactly the opposite.
Well,
And-
unfortunately,
and-
I don't have insulin yet.
But
So,
I-
but the other pills are just as bad.
Yeah. But I think with this situation with the pricing, I think that will set up competition and will bring prices
Right.
down. So
That
we'll
would be
know in
great.
60 days.
That would be
Well, I
great.
like to see what they're doing. I know. I've actually met the persons in charge of that, Allegazar, and he's a pretty intelligent man who used to be president of Eli Lilly down in Indiana, and he, I think, can come up with some good ideas, because one of the problems that I know he mentioned publicly early on in his tenure is the fact that the drug manufacturers have to go through certain sequence of moving the product through to the market, to the user, and everybody has to take their cut. So you got 4 different organizations taking a cut on that, and that's not, that hurts their control of the selling price.
Yeah. They talk about the middleman in everything. In
This-
that case, it's 2, 3, 4 middlemen.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's some of the things that I think he'll pay attention to and see if he can cut some of that out.
It's worth a try.
Yeah.
Hopefully it works.
Let me just go to a peripheral issue that I remember reading in the paper about what happened with just locally here with the Board of Education approving these air gun situation. And now you have people saying that they shouldn't have any kind of guns, whether they're BB guns or not, in the school. They don't, well, a lot of people haven't been on this earth as long as I have, I guess. But I went to high school, we had a rifle team. And we had live ammunition in the school with at least a dozen rifles. And we never had a problem. It was training, it was safety for everybody. It was a competition on just targetry. And I thought it gave people a great respect for what could happen with that. We never even heard of a threatening in that. And then I went to college and met a woman who later was my wife. She was on her rifle team too. So I knew I didn't mess with her.
Yeah.
Yes, dear. No,
And my-
Anything you say.
actually, my wife is a better shot than I am. she has a little target silhouettes, and she shows them to her every once in a while just to remind me. And I remember.
I have a daughter who did that to her new husband. She worked with she went to the FBI school and went to so she kept her targets on that.
I was actually shocked that passed the
Yeah.
Board of Education
Yeah.
to allow that happen, because I've always considered it to be a very liberally biased board. I mean, I'm happy that actually passed. I think it's a wonderful thing, a good skill to have.
It is.
Well,
Very
now
good
I
skill.
think to get the kids to train it to get them to change it now. They have so many people writing a petition to.
Well, there again, you jump into something without figuring out what the consequences might be.
Well, we'll see what happens. It's
Yeah.
going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Again, you're wondering what people are thinking of, and you got to teach safety on all these things.
But the way the legislatures work now, every 2 years, you pass something, I
Yeah.
come along and I repeal it. You come back and you set it up again, I repeal it. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
I don't know how we're going to. Well, we're here to educate people, I guess. Maybe, hey guys, let's get something done. Think it through. I thought, serving on that marijuana committee, we went through it fairly liberally. I mean, literally through everything, and tried to be complete in the analysis, looking at the good things and the bad things. And we didn't come out with a pro or con on it, because that's up for a lot of people to decide on. But I think we outlined just about as many potential problems and recommendations to do things to minimize your problems when you allow this stuff to be sold as a regular product on the market. But they're not doing that. They didn't write the legislation that way.
Yeah.
again, it's something, well, we want it, so we'll just put it in without any of the safety things that have to go along with it.
Right, without any other consequences.
So we got to
And
pay
all
for it
too
first.
often, that's the way things are done nowadays.
Yeah.
And it's no different in Washington.
No,
I mean,
no,
it's
that's
the
what I'm
exact
saying.
same thing there.
Yeah.
I mean, you've
It's
got a
worse
bunch of
there.
people there that
You just
are
have
simply
more
worried
people.
about re-election.
Yeah.
They don't care about any legislation.
Yeah, and they
And
spend,
that's more apparent every day.
and they add 3 zeros to everything they spend
Yeah.
for what
Yeah.
that's done in the state.
Well, if I'm going to vote for your bill, you have to give me a bridge to nowhere,
Right.
you know.
Well, that's, yeah, too much
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's getting me to believe a little bit more in term limits. I don't know what you
Yeah.
guys think about term limits.
Well-
I've always thought there's, you know, it's nice to have somebody's there with the experience that they can go back in history and, you know, talk about it, maybe know how to get things through. But now, I don't think it makes any difference
No,
anymore.
it doesn't.
Well, of course, the irony is that every election is a term limit,
Right.
because theoretically you're out if the voting population doesn't like you and they want to put somebody else in there. It's kind of a shame that it does seem to be a money game now, where the incumbency has so much
Yeah.
money. And well, the other thing too is both political parties, and correct me if I'm wrong, they've got this thing set up now where once you're in,
Yeah.
the political party will support you, so you don't necessarily. It makes it difficult to primary somebody, even if they're
Right.
not necessarily
Right.
the best
Right.
person. So I'm not sure how we get around that issue. It's an imperfect system. I'm still a little bit afraid of changing it. You know, it's like, again, that Churchill had that wonderful saying that, you know, democracy is the worst form of government except for all others. You know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at the election system, saying, okay, if we start trying to fundamentally change it, will we create a situation that's worse than the problem we have right
Right.
now?
Yeah.
I
It's
know
just like the
that's-
controversy over the Electoral College.
Oh,
Do you do away with it or don't you?
Oh God.
I mean, you know, the system now is probably not perfect, but what is better? Eliminating it and having one state or two states elect your president?
So yeah, you're going to have the voter fraud in California decide
Yeah.
who the president of the United States is going to
Yeah.
be from here going forward?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And I hope that New Hampshire has the good sense to not vote for that.
Yeah.
I saw that they were talking about trying to do a split ticket too in terms of how the
Really?
electoral
oh yeah.
votes were awarded. And there's an argument that can be made for that, but you know, my personal opinion was before New Hampshire does anything, get California to do it, in
Yeah.
New York. So if you're going to start proportionally giving
Yeah.
out the electoral votes, because if we do it, it's almost like getting rid of the electoral college, where they're going to give all of their electoral
Yeah.
votes to one person, and
Right.
we're splitting ours. It weakens the position of the
entire
smaller
system.
states.
I think you have to get agreement across all the states that it's going to be one system, not two.
Right.
Thankfully, it takes a constitutional amendment to change it, and that's not going to happen.
Well, I agree, because I think that was one of the wisest things our forefathers did.
Very
saw
wise
that-
men, weren't they?
Brilliant. I mean, really, looking at it, I mean, students of history, I wish they would teach history, a little more history in the
Well,
schools.
that's another problem, isn't it? That the things that have gone on before, people don't know anything about. I mean, it's not that you have to memorize dates, but you should memorize
And now you
what
have to
happened.
actually erase history. You can't even present the facts as they occurred. You have to erase it and forget about it,
Right.
like it never happened.
Yeah, well, that's different conditions today or something or other. Huh? Oh, I don't think so. I think we're all human beings. We all have some of the
Yeah.
same things that our forefathers had. Maybe not as
I
many
mean,
smarts.
events occurred, and you can't take that away.
Right.
You can't eliminate it and act like it didn't happen.
Right, right.
Well, I mean, I was young once, and I think every generation that comes up thinks that they've got it figured out.
Yeah.
And they're looking at the previous generation or the people who were in control at that point in time saying, boy, you knuckleheads, we know how to fix this. And I think as I became older and more conservative, I came to understand that things are as they are for a reason. And usually even some of the things that didn't make sense to me as a younger person, after I've got a chance to understand what was going on, we fell into that the way of doing things because we tried everything else and it didn't work. So it's like, the liberal arts education. That is the product of 2,500 years of trial and error to get to the point where we said, okay, this is the important stuff, this is the things you need to know, and this is how we're going to teach you. And now, like you can see in education, every single generation, not even a generation, it's like every 5 years, this new way of doing things, this new theory, throw the old stuff out, we're going to try this. I mean, how are the SAT scores? I mean,
Now they want to do away with the SAT
of course they do because they're so awful. And you're looking at this saying, folks, things fell into these situations for a reason. Don't be in such a big hurry to try to throw it all out and start all over with a clean slate. You're going to, and especially if you don't pay attention to history. Oh my God.
But isn't it always beneficial to remember what went on in the past? So you don't repeat it. The old saying, do the same thing over and over and expect a different outcome.
Yeah.
Well, you think then the socialist wave that's coming around is going to do anything? I mean, there's so many people that are spouting it. Are the young people really that interested in seeing that kind of operation? They can't see the fault that has occurred every year with different countries around the world when they try it.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, at one point in our society, greed and envy were considered, sins. And now it's a political movement where you had people looking at the accomplishments of others and the things that they may have accumulated because of the risks they took and the work that they did, and suddenly saying, you don't deserve that, right? I mean, isn't there a little bit of pride and envy in that kind of an attitude to say to somebody, you don't deserve what you have, I'm going to take it from you, and we're going to distribute it among ourselves? Because how is that not theft? How is that different than a guy sticking you up in your driveway with a gun saying, you've got too much, I've got a better plan for the money you have in your pocket.
That's it.
And I deserve it, and that's why I'm taking it.
I know how to spend your money better than you do.
And so I look at this and I'm saying, where is that sense? I mean, I guess when you get rid of morality, it becomes a lot easier to start, doing things like this. I just hope that some of the people who are coming up now, who are actually dabbling with the idea of socialism, really look at it for what it is, which is it's the idea of taking things from others. Once you destroy the idea of private property, it destroys everything. I mean, because there is no incentive for you to go out and take risks and try hard when you know that somebody's just going to take it from you if you're lucky enough to be successful.
If what you earn ultimately doesn't belong to you, then who does it belong to?
Right. Everybody else.
Everybody else.
Everybody gets 5 cents. Yeah.
Again, it was a wonderful expression I heard. I think I've said it before, but it's worth saying again. Free enterprise creates unequal wealth. Socialism creates equal misery. Because everything just grinds down to the lowest possible level.
Yeah. I don't think people realize many, probably most of the people who are billionaires give a lot of that money away. And not only they pay in taxes, but what they do in philanthropy. How many hospitals, how many educational places, how many special things that get, somebody wants something in their name, they'll give you $5 million or $100 million. And that, I don't think they realize how much of their money is spent that way.
And they're the people that create the jobs.
Now, you can look at some of these people who do have foundations and stuff, who hide their money in there and hardly give it out to anybody. I think maybe that's one way of looking at it.
Like the Clinton Foundation.
Where did you come up with that? Did they give out any more than 1% of their money? Anyway, but there are things that are happening that way. There are other people, but many people give you so much darn money that that can you really count that against the
to your point about the jobs. My uncle, who was an Irish immigrant, said to me once. He said, "I never got a job from a poor man." You know,
That's right.
and so you should be
exactly right.
celebrating wealth and the idea that you have these super overachievers who drive all this innovation, and that's the thing too that people have to understand. The pie can get bigger.
Oh, that's right.
You know, and so it doesn't matter. You know, okay, I gave this as an analogy with somebody before too. Let's say that the both of us had a net worth of $100,000 because of your hard work and luck, whatever you want to call it. You're suddenly worth $5 million, and I did okay too, but I'm worth $1. Okay, so now you're worth 5 times more than me. Look at this income inequity that we have here.
Yeah.
But I ask myself, am I worse off because you have 5? Or am I better off because I went from 100 to $1 million?
Right.
Right? It's not income
We
inequity,
both benefited by the way we conducted our business.
and the pie got bigger,
And the pie got
and
bigger.
everybody is doing better, and that's the thing that people need to.
More cherries in the pie.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how people will take to some of this in the coming elections. I mean, it's going to start in the fall where it's local elections, and then next year is a presidential election. How do you think that's going to be handled? I mean, right now we have, 22 people on the Democratic side and maybe 2 or 3 on the Republican side, and toss in another couple sprinkles and different.
I think pretty quickly about 10 of those Democratic hopefuls
Yeah,
will be eliminated.
yeah.
Because you listen to some of them, and it's obvious they don't know what they're talking about. They have not studied
Yeah.
the issues.
Well, it's like, yeah, and there's probably some that just want their name out there and say, I ran for president.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
a
they might
Beto
have been
O'Rourke or
funding
something.
themselves.
Like Joe
with a-
Biden.
You know, no, it's
No.
funny. Joe Biden is, I mean, a lot of people have some real problems with him in terms of how he conducts himself around people, women and children. And I think there's some legitimate beefs about that. I find his behavior very troubling. But what people haven't been talking about is what I consider to be some of the blatant corruption that he exercised in while he was the vice president of the United States. Like, how many people know that when he went to China on a business, well, it was governmental business, took his son Hunter Biden with him. The Chinese government awarded Hunter Biden's company, I think, $1.5 billion worth of business, right? On the plane, Air Force Two, while Joe's out there
Right.
supposedly representing American interests.
Absolutely.
Right? So I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's a fact. Everybody knows it.
Well, not
I don't think
everybody
they
is.
do.
That's
I
the-
mean,
Well,
there's the average person.
No, it's not being brought up as an issue, but yet everybody knows it.
Right. So I mean, so which master is, Joe Biden actually serving? He just came out recently and said China's not a problem or a threat
Yeah,
or a
right.
competitor.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking that's the Chinese money talking.
Does he know what's going on in the South China Sea? Obviously not.
Well, I think he does, but maybe he's one of those honest politicians who stayed bought, by the Chinese. and he did the same thing in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
He took his
Yeah.
son out there
Took his
again
son there.
too. His son somehow became like the vice president of a Ukrainian oil company. And then when I think the Ukrainian government was trying to investigate the corruption there, the State Department, Biden and the State Department stepped in and got the prosecutor thrown out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to squash the investigation of the blatant corruption, again, that he was involved with. So I'm hoping when people look at that guy, they just say he is not looking out for American interests.
Well, he and AOC go hand in hand. That's the smoozer and the loser.
Wow.
I don't know how you, yeah. Well, it's going to be something interesting, and I wonder how the younger people are going to vote. I wonder how some of the ethnic groups are going to vote. The ones that, are they happy with the fact that the unemployment rate's going down, for example, for them?
You better worry about how many times they're going to vote.
Well, you have to worry about that too, but I don't think that's as much as a problem as the ones that were the illegals that are going to get the vote. Not how many times, but the ones that
prisoners.
aren't. Well, yeah, that's
Got to
true
let the
too.
prisoners in prison vote.
We'll see what happens on
Yeah.
those things.
Well, we talked about that. I think if a person's done his time, right, and gets back out into society,
Thanks,
Absolutely.
with very few exceptions, I say restore their rights to
Absolutely,
them.
I do too.
But while
While
they're
you're
in
in-
prison, serving for some of the heinous things they've done,
They're still a felon while they're in prison.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely not.
How do you treat people whose terms are suspended, but if they do something, they'll be implemented again? Do you treat them that they can
As-
vote as long as it's suspended, or?
As long as they're on parole,
Yeah.
they're still actually a criminal while they're
Okay,
under
so you're
parole.
thinking that they should, as
It has
long
to
as
be
they,
the end of the line when
And-
all is cleared.
Yes.
when all's cleared.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate.
Oh,
too.
yeah, sure.
But I was wondering if people would play around with that too, because a lot of people are getting suspended sentences.
Yeah.
Now, just to keep them out of the
Yeah.
crowded prisons. But
No, unless they've served the time completely, they should not be allowed to vote.
you think that we should have some kind of way of bringing people together to see that it's not just because you're black, ethnic, or whatever, that you should be looking out for principles or ways of doing things rather than these other ties that you may have.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. It's like, the African continent is the idea that it's not driven by ideals, it's driven by, tribes or blood. And that, I think, gets you into trouble, and that's where you really,
Yeah.
I've always considered America to be a country of ideals. And so when people talk about the shifting demographic population, that, there's going to be less white people, and
Right.
everything, I don't care about that. What I really, really care about is, are the people buying into the ideals of America? Because you can be a black person, yellow, whatever, ethnic variety you are. If you buy into the idea of, equal treatment under the law, private property rights, personal freedom, I'm okay with you being here. We need better, I'd like you to be a competent person who can contribute to, the
Yeah.
economy. That would help. But that's really, really what, and this goes back to the school systems, isn't it?
In a way, yes, I think so. But that's exactly what I was trying to get to, though. But how do we bring people together to work with ideas rather than prejudices? Let's focus it that way.
Well, that's exactly why I say what's going on with the legislature.
Yeah.
Both sides have good ideas, but unless you bring those ideas together and talk about them and try to come up with a decent idea, one that works for everybody, you're going to have the same situation all the time. You're always going to be divided, and one side is going to pass something, the next side's going to come along and repeal it. And that will go on for eternity. It's been going on now for the last 8 or 10 years.
Yeah.
In
Well,
the
it's
state
gone longer
legislature.
than that, really.
Probably
Yeah,
longer than that, yeah.
They're starting to mix a little bit. The lines aren't firm.
The
say.
friendships are not there,
Right.
especially in this term.
Uh-huh.
The friendships that are usually there are just not there. You can see the division clean throughout the LOB and the State House. You can see it in the cafeteria. We used to sit in the cafeteria, Democrats and Republicans around the table, just shooting the breeze, having a good time. We were all friends. Now, Democrats are on one side, the Republicans are on the other side. And they sort of look at each other like there's a void between there.
Well, there is a little bit of a void in terms of worldview, isn't there? 'Cause,
But even so, if each side takes their idea and brings it together and tries to pick out the best parts of each idea and make something out of it, then you've got progress. But as it is now, you have no progress. You're treading water.
Do you think this family leave program is going to help bring people together?
No, it's a tax.
No, you got the tax and you got the choice type. I guess it's the two ways that.
You don't have an opt-in or an opt-out.
well, yeah,
Not in the Dan Feltus.
No, but in the
in the governors.
in the governors, you have the
Yeah,
choice
that's
of
what I'm
opt-in
saying.
or opt-out.
How do we get those two groups to work together?
That's exactly what I mean. We've
Yeah.
got to get those two groups together. Family leave is a good idea. It would be a good program. If exercise properly.
Well, I think one of the big things that we all usually look at is there going to be choice for people in there? Is it going to be required? Is it going to be optional? Is it going to be varied so you can have what fits you, your situation more appropriately?
I think both programs now are one size fits all. There are no levels to it.
No, okay, that might be one way that you do that's the governor's situation. But at least there is an option of joining it or not joining it.
Yes.
Well, here it's everybody, and it's a tax on you, and a tax that's not even controlled by the legislature.
Right. And it's a tax that can increase at any time.
Right.
Well,
So-
again, you have to call me cynical, and I am
Okay,
at times.
cynical.
Thank you. But in that last session, when we brought forward the Ober Amendment,
Yeah.
right, to the bill, which was going to put the voluntary system in place, the Democrats had the opportunity of putting the system in place so we could have at least tried it. And then they're going to come back and said, this is not working, we have to go and try to do something else. But they chose not to do that. From my, again, cynical perspective, this really was the income tax, and they found what they thought was the perfect vehicle to push it.
And
that's what they really want, is the income tax, not
Yeah.
the family medical leave.
And that was the point that Dan Feltus and I sponsored that bill. And that was the point when it got to that point, that's where I dropped off of it and stopped even pursuing the bill.
Right.
Because it just went the opposite way.
So what, did you get any support for what you wanted at all?
No,
Okay.
no.
So people just sort of fell
It just divided the two sides that much more.
Huh.
Because I was for the opt-in, opt-out,
Right.
not making it mandatory for
Right.
everyone. And they insisted that it had to be across the board.
It's,
What argument did they use to say that it had to be that? Because that's
In order to sustain it. There was no other way to sustain it than to tax everyone.
Oh, there is. You make it
There is, I'm saying, with that bill,
just
that
like
was
everything.
the idea, that everybody had to opt into it
But
because
that's a fallacy.
they needed the money to sustain it from everyone.
The insurance companies wouldn't be in existence if they didn't figure that one out.
Well,
well, there you go. It can be done without an income tax.
Right.
yes, it can.
Yes.
And the governor's bill is a good bill.
The governor's bill is a good
But somehow
bill.
or other, the two are going to have to come together and make concessions.
And I just hope that the people get
Yeah.
that if we went down the road the Democrats want, does anybody honestly believe that we'll stop at 1/2%
Right.
on our wages, and it'll never get bigger, and we'll never try to tie it into anything else and start spinning the thing out of control like they did in Connecticut?
Right.
Right?
Well, within the bill, it says the commissioner has the ability to raise it at any time he feels necessary. Give one man that
And
authority.
nobody checks their efficiency at all. At least with the independent profit-making companies, they check to see how they're running. I believe that Medicare is their big problem is they didn't cut their error limit down to a reasonable one.
Yeah.
If Visa or MasterCard had the kind of error limit that they do for reimbursement, they would go out of business.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you love to be able to run your household, folks out there working for a living, to say, listen, just try to stay within your budget, and if you don't, you get to go to your employer and tell them they have to give you more money. That's a recipe for fiscal discipline right there.
Yeah, right,
Talk
right.
about going out of business.
Your employer will go out of business pretty damn fast.
Oh, boy.
Yep.
Anyway, well, let's see what we're going to do. Let's see if we can influence our legislature in every way. The audience, we really would appreciate any kind of feedback on some of these issues, and talk to your local representative. That goes whether it's city issues or state issues or federal issues. Talk to them, because that's the only way you can be heard. And you want to run an effective operation. We want to do things. We are in a good environment right now economically. We want to keep it that way, and we can recover a lot of our money to get more programs that are needed.
Right?
I mean,
Programs that are instituted properly, where you
Right.
get what is saying, get for your buck?
Oh, good bang for your
A
buck.
good bang for your buck.
There you go.
I
Yeah.
couldn't think of it.
Okay.
Senior moment.
I think we all have those. Hopefully not too often.
More so now.
But we'd like to invite our audience to our Republican meetings. They're held the second Thursday of every month. Go to gop.org and find out information, nationalgop.org, about our organization and how we're going to be. We have a new chairman of Jack Tully. And we're going to be reorganizing the organization. We'd like you to come and join us. Thank you
that's-
very much.
Oh. Are we finished?
Yeah.
Never mind. I won't say what I was going to say then.
Well,
You need to pause before you finish, because you're going out live. So, are you all done?
We're all done.
I guess we are.
thank you, Carl.
Okay. Give me 30 seconds.
Okay.
He's going to have to trim it somehow.
Yeah. I thought we had time left.
Oh, yeah, well,